Hi, everybody. Welcome to WebYeshiva. I'm David Sedley. This is a one-off shiur as part of the series on the Haggadah. So I'm going to be speaking about Hallel, but it also connects with the previous two classes I gave on numbers in the Seder. So if you didn't listen to those, you're welcome, invited to go back and listen to them as well. Tonight we're going to speak about Hallel. Hallel, I guess everybody knows what it is in general, but there's a lot of strange things about the Hallel that we say on Seder night. So I'm going to try and ask a bunch of questions and maybe even answer some of them if we're lucky. So let's talk about what Hallel is. The Gemara in Psachim tells us, in fact, records a dispute, but we're just going to go with one side of it. Chachamim omrim nevim shebenehem tiknu lehem Yisrael sheomrim oto al kol perek v'perek v'al kol tzar v'tzar shelo tavo alem liYisrael. The rabbis established Hallel, or the prophets established to say Hallel, to be recited on every time, every occasion, and every trouble that happened, that befell the Jewish people. And when the Jews will be redeemed in the future, we will say Hallel on that redemption. So there's two kinds of Hallel here. There's the Hallel that you say when we were saved from trouble, from disaster, and there's a kind of a Hallel that we say for redemption. And that's going to kind of be my theme tonight, I guess, that there's two Hallels that we say in the Haggadah. Parenthetically, I haven't even started yet, and I'm going off on a tangent, but Rambam, Maimonides, he wrote a book called Sefer Mitzvot, where he lists the 613 mitzvot and explains them. And in the beginning, he has a series of rules whereby he comes down to exactly 613. He's got to limit the number of rules. He's got to decide what to include and what not to include. And he lays out principles of what counts as a rule. The first principle, he says, Shoresh Rishon, is that the 613 mitzvot, when the Gemara talks about Tariag 613 mitzvot, they have to be mitzvot that are from the Torah. You can't include rabbinic mitzvot in your list of 613 because, as we learnt last week, the concept of 613 comes from the verse Torah tzivah lanu Moshe, that Moshe commanded us Torah in numerical value 611, plus the first two commandments of the 10 commandments were said by God. That makes 613. So if Moshe commanded them, they've got to be from the Torah. Says Rambam, that comes to exclude, for example, Hallel, which was established by the prophets later on, and therefore that can't be one of the 613 mitzvot. Ramban Nachmanides writes a commentary or disagreements with Rambam on Sefer Mitzvot, and particularly on these introductory principles. And he says, how can you say that Hallel was invented by the prophets and came later when the Jews sang Hallel when they were redeemed from Egypt? And the reason that we say Hallel on Seder night is because that is what the Jews did when they were redeemed from Egypt. So Moshe Rabbeinu was singing Hallel originally, and therefore Hallel is the Torah law. And that becomes relevant. We're just talking about what bracha to make or if to make. That's just a parenthetical statement because go through the source was too complex and too off topic. Anyway, the rabbis say Hallel. In Psachim, the rabbis say that Hallel is whenever anything good or bad happens, or anything bad happens, you say Hallel. The Gemara Arachim, the other end of Shas, gives specific days that we do say Hallel. D'amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rav Shimon ben Yotzedek. Right? Rabbi Yochanan says in the name of Shimon ben Yotzedek, Shmona Asar Yamim Shayachid Kamar ben Hallel. There are 18 days a year that an individual completes Hallel. Now, I don't know why it says individual, because in fact, there's a discussion I won't go into whether Hallel is a communal event or an individual event. Anyway, 18 times you say Hallel, and they are Shmona Yemei HaChag, 8 days of Sukkot. We're talking about in Israel, because in Chutz La'aretz there's 9 days of Sukkot, and we'll get to that later on. 8 days of Sukkot. Shmona Yemei Chanukah, 8 days of Chanukah. That makes, anyone keeping count? That's 16. Good. Yom Tov Rishon Shel Pesach, the first day of Pesach. Yom Tov Shel Atzeret, and the first day, the day of Shavuot. That makes 18 days that we say Hallel. And we'll talk about why Pesach only gets 1 day and not 7 days. Well, Begola, and if you're outside of Israel, Esrim V'Achad, then there are 21 days of saying Hallel. Tisha Yemei Chag, there's 9 days of Sukkot. Shmona Yemei Chanukah, 8 days of Chanukah. Shnei Yamim Tovim Shel Pesach, 2 days of Pesach. Shnei Yamim Tovim Shel Atzeret, 2 days of Shavuot. So here in Arachin, saying Hallel, Gemara Pesachim says Hallel is a response to being saved from tragedy in the past and the concept of redemption for the future. Arachin says Hallel is just kind of perfunctory. You have a yontiv, you say Hallel. That's what you do. And then it says, why don't we say Hallel on Rosh Hashanah? Why don't we say on Yom Kippur? Why don't we say it on Purim? But that's not for this class. The Gemara asks on that, Ma'ishna b'chag damin kol yoma, or Ma'ishna pesach damin kol yoma. Why do we say Hallel for 8 days on Sukkot, but we don't say it every day of Pesach, in fact, only the first day? Because it says, D'chag chalukim b'korbanotehen. On Sukkot, every day there's a different sacrifice, a different number of bullocks are brought. So it's a unique sacrifice. To Pesach, on Pesach, it's the same sacrifice each and every day, and therefore there's nothing new that would allow us to say Hallel every day. Right? Every day you have to have something new to bring about the Hallel. When it says that we only say Hallel for 1 day of actually, what am I talking about? I'll say it the next. Yeah, no, I'm not going to say it. Sorry. It says we don't say Hallel on the last days of Pesach. It also doesn't say in this list in Arachin that we say Hallel on Rosh Chodesh, but we do, right? We do. So that's because we don't say full Hallel. We say the abbreviated Hallel. There's 2 chapters of Tehillim that we leave out on both the last six or 7 days of Pesach and on Rosh Chodesh, and therefore that's counted as if we don't say it at all. And the Gemara discusses that. We're not going to go into it. So this is talking about counting up. This is not. What else is missing from here? Seder night. It doesn't mention saying Hallel on Seder night, and on Seder we do say the full Hallel. So it's strange that the Arachin, the Gemara in Arachin, leaves out saying Seder at nighttime. And in fact, twice, right? Many people have a custom to say Hallel in shul on Seder night, and then again at home during the Seder. So that would make it not 18, but 20 times in Israel and 23 times outside of Israel, and it's strange that that's left out. Another reason often given for why we don't say Hallel on the last days of Pesach is because of this Gemara Megillah. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Mai dichtiv v'lo karav zeh al zeh kol halayla. The Jews leave Egypt. They come to the Red Sea. They can't go in because there's a sea. The Egyptians behind them. And the verse says they didn't draw close to each other all night long. The angels wanted to sing a song of praise of God for saving the Jews from the Red Sea. God says that my children are drowning in the sea, and you're going to say Shira. So there is an opinion brought in the Taz, I believe, that says that the reason we don't say Hallel on the last days of Pesach is because we would have to say it on the 6th day of Pesach, which is the day of the splitting of the sea, and that's the day that we don't say Hallel because the angels couldn't say Hallel because the Egyptians all drowned, and therefore we only say it on the first day and not the other days. That's a much later explanation of why we don't say Hallel. Okay, anyway, so we say Hallel on these days and apparently not on Seder night, and yet we do, as you see in the picture. Former President Obama leading the Seder there, and we do say Hallel on Seder night, right? So the fact that Mishnah says, Mishnah says in Megillah, Matznishin, Kol Hayom Kasher L'Kriyat Megillah, the whole day, you can read the Megillah anytime during the day, but you can't read it at night. For the Kriyat Hallel, you can read Hallel anytime during the day, but you can't read it at night. L'Kriyat Shafat, L'Lav Tefillah Musafim, Tefillat Musafim. Similarly, you can't blow the shofar at night, but only during the day. You can take the lulav and etrog by day and not night. You can pray musaf, and you can offer the musaf, the additional sacrifices, by day and not by night. So you can't say Hallel at night. Why then are we saying Hallel on Seder night? And the Gemara brings proof texts from verses, right? Menalen. From where do we know that we can't say do these things at night? The verses v'hayamim ha'ela niskan v'nazim. Right, reading the Megillah, we have to read by the day because the days will be remembered and we'll do the mitzvot. So Megillah is only by day. It says v'hayamim. L'kriyat halal dichtiv. We can only say Hallel by day because it says Mimizrach shemesh ad mavor, from the rising of the sun until it sets. Omer zeh yom asah, and Rabbi Yossi Omer zeh yom asah Hashem. We say in Hallel, this is the day that God made. So that means Hallel is only during the day. How can we say Hallel at night on Seder? It seems to break all of the rules. It's an extra time that's not mentioned in the Gemara in Arachin. It's at night time, which goes against the Mishnah in Megillah. So, and yet, we do, and we know that we do, because the Mishnah in Psachim says, Mazgul lo koshlishi, mivrech al mazono. The third cup, we pour the third cup, and say birkat hamazon. Revi'i, the fourth cup of wine, gomer alavet Hallel. You finished Hallel, right? So that's because we already started it before we had dinner, didn't we? We started Hallel at the beginning, and now we're going to finish Hallel. Gomer alav birkat hashir, and then you make a bracha of the song, which is, I guess, a bracha after saying Hallel. Between the first and second cups and the second and third cups, you can drink as much extra wine as you want. If 4 cups is not enough for you, if you're very thirsty. But between the third cup and the fourth cup, you can't drink any wine. You can't have a break there between them. So somehow the Hallel, I'm trying to connect the Hallel to the Birkat HaMazon. So we do have to say Hallel on Seder night. That's explicit in the Mishnah. And the Haggadah, as you know, right? This is, when you're really close, you can see the meal is just 1 or 2 pages away in your Haggadah, and then you've got to pick up the cup, and you think something's going to happen, but you cover them outside because you're not going to eat. And we say, therefore, we are obligated to thank, praise, Lord, glorify, exalt, lavish, bless, raise high, and acclaim. Someone read the thesaurus. Misha salavotenu falanu et kol hanesim ha'elu, to the one who did for us and for our ancestors all of these miracles. Hotzienu mi'avdot lecherot. He took us out from slavery to freedom, mi'agon lesimcha, from mourning to joy, or from sadness to joy, mi'avli yom tov, from mourning to festivity, mafilal gadol, from darkness to light, shibud legeulah, from slavery to freedom, v'nomer lefanav shira chadasha, hallelujah, and we shall say before him a new song, hallelujah. And that is the beginning, right? Then we start saying Hallel, hallelujah, hallelujah, Hashem. You know this, right? You say this, and then we say the second, but say Jisham Mitzrayim, when Israel left Egypt, right? The house of Jacob, right? Etc. Etc. The first 2 chapters of Hallel, and then we're just getting excited by that, and then all of a sudden we stop and we pick up a cup, we make a bracha. Baruch atah Hashem, right? We make a bracha on the first part of the Seder, and now we're going to say Brei Pri Hagafen, and then we're going to have matzah and maror and go through and have our meal. So it's strange that we start off, we've got to praise God, and then we stop, and then we pick up again afterwards with Birkat HaMazon, and we go back into Hallel. So that's the format that we have in our Haggadah. It's strange that we're saying it at night. It's strange that it's not listed on the 18 days of saying Hallel. It's very strange that we stop in the middle just when we get excited. Not only do we stop, but we say our bracha like as if we're finished saying Hallel. And then we're going to be continued later. So one of the explanations, or one of the reasons for saying Hallel on Seder night, and why it is not listed in the 21 or 18 days, is because there's a there's a concept of the 18 days were saying Hallel because of a festival. But another time they said Hallel was when they were sacrificing the Korban Pesach and when they were eating the Korban Pesach. So the Mishnah in Pesachim, this is talking about the difference between Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni. Pesach Sheni is not the second day of Pesach, but Pesach that occurs a month later. Right? Ma ben Pesach Rishon and Sheni. What's the difference between Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni? A Rishon Asur b'bayo bal matzeh. The first Pesach you're not allowed to have any matzah, not allowed to have any chametz in your house. But the second Pesach you can have chametz and matzah together. That's fine. You don't have to clean your house again. Harishon ta'un halal b'achilato. The first Pesach, you have to say Hallel while you are eating your Korban Pesach. V'hasheni eno ta'un halal b'achilato. But the Pesach Sheni, you don't have to say Hallel while you're eating it. However, zeh v'zeh ta'un halal b'siyatan. For both, you have to recite Hallel when you are slaughtering it. V'nechen tzleil matzah marorim, and they're eaten roasted on matzah and maror. V'dochin et Shabbat, and you can shech them on Shabbat. So we see here that there is a mitzvah to recite Hallel when you're eating your Korban Pesach. And perhaps that's the reason, we'll see this explicitly in the Maharal, perhaps that's the reason that we say Hallel on Seder night, right? It's not the Hallel that we say to celebrate a miracle. It's not the Hallel that we say on a special occasion. It's the Hallel that we say when we're eating our Korban Pesach, although we don't have a Korban Pesach nowadays. And therefore, we have to say it at night because Korban Pesach has to be eaten at night. And it's a different kind of a Hallel than the one we say on festivals, than the one we say the next morning in Shul on Pesach. And the Gemara gives the source for why we say Hallel when we're eating the Korban Pesach. Right? How do we know what's the source for this? Am Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yotzadok. Amakra Hashir Yelachem Kalel Hitkadesh Chag. There's a pasuk in Isaiah. You shall have a song as in the night when a festival is sanctified. Laila Hamikudash Lachag Taun Hallel. So if it's a night that is sanctified for the festival, it's a night of Pesach that's connected to the festival of Pesach. Taun Hallel, you have to recite Hallel. Laila Shein Mikudash Lachag, but Pesach Sheni, which is not connected to the festival of Pesach, and Taun Hallel. Okay, fine. You don't have to say Hallel there. And just in terms of the sacrificing process and saying Hallel, then Ketzad Nishchat Nichnasa Hakat Rishon. I'm just quoting Rambam. It's easier than going on. How was the Korban Pesach shechted? Nichnasa Hakat Rishona Ad Shetit Malei Hazara. They would divide up all the Jews into three groups. The first group would go into the temple courtyard. Noalin Zelatot Azara, they would lock the doors of the temple courtyard. Everyone would start shechting their Korban Pesach. As while they were shechting and sacrificing their Korban Pesach, the Leviim would be singing Hallel. If the Leviim finished saying Hallel and this group had not yet finished doing all their Korban, not shechting the Korban Pesach, they would repeat it as they could know. If they repeated a second time and then they still hadn't finished the Korban Pesach, they would say it a third time. But in fact, they never had to say Hallel a third time. Everyone finished their Korban Pesach, finished sacrificing their Korban Pesach in the time it took to say Hallel twice. So Hallel is intensely connected to offering the sacrifice and then eating the sacrifice. So it's a different kind of Hallel. The other strange thing on Pesach night, right? Again, Hallel at night, Hallel broken up into two, Hallel not one of the times that's counted. Another thing is that we finish saying the regular Hallel that we say on festivals, and then we say afterwards Hallel Hagadol. Hallel Hagadol, at its most basic, the simplest explanation is it's Psalm 127, I think, which is the Kil Olam Chasto Hallel, right? The 26 verses, and each one ends with Kil Olam Chasto. We say it on Shabbat morning. So Tana Rabbanan, this is a Baraita talking about the fourth cup of wine, Revi'i, the fourth cup, Gomer Alav et Hallel. you finish saying Hallel that you already started before. V'omer Hallel HaGadol, and then you say Hallel HaGadol, Div Rabbi Tarfon. That's the opinion of Rabbi Tarfon. Some people say that you instead say the verse or the Tehillim of the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. It seems to say Hallel HaGadol, as according to Rabbi Tarfon's opinion. Mehechan Hallel HaGadol. What does it mean to say Hallel HaGadol? What is that? Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mehodu ad Narot Bafel. We start with the beginning of 136. Hodu L'Shem Ki Tov Ki Olam Chasto. And you stop when you get to the beginning of 137, when you get to the rivers of Babylon. Rabbi Yochanan Omer Meshir HaMalot ad Narot Bavel. He said, Rabbi Yochanan says, you go back two chapters earlier. You say Shir HaMalot ad Narot Bavel. And Rav Acha bar Yaakov Miki Yaakov Bachalo Ka ad Narot Bavel. He's a compromised position. You go back. You just say 2 chapters of Tehillim. That's your Hallel HaGadol. In fact, we follow the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, and we just say 136. Hodu L'Shem Ki Tov Ki Olam Chasto. Lama nikra shemo Hallel HaGadol. Why do we call it Hallel HaGadol? Amar Rabbi Yochanan mipnei sheHakadosh Baruch Hu yoshev b'romo she'olam u'mechalek mezonot lekol b'riah. The reason it is called Hallel HaGadol is because God, I guess the Great One, sits and in the heavens, in the heights of the earth, and provides food for all his creatures, for everything that's living. And that's why we say Hanoten. Hanoten. Come on, Michael, help me out. What's the verse? Kilam Chazdo. Noten lechem lechol. No, something like that. So we say a verse in there. Someone can look up 136:25, which says that God gives food to everybody, and because of that, we call this Hallel HaGadol. The greatest thing is God providing us with food. Amar Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. So Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says, Hani esrim v'shisha hodu keneged me. Why the 26 times that we say Ki l'olam chasto? What do they correspond to? Keneged me, keneged esrim v'shisha dorot shebara Kadosh Baruch Hu ba'olamo v'lo natan lem Torah. The 26 generations from the time of Adam until Moses, when God kept the world going without giving it the Torah, right? We say that, thank you. Noten lechem l'chol basar ki l'olam chasto. Thank you very much. Thank you, Michael. So the Torah, the world exists because of the Torah that is being learned, but there were 26 generations before Mount Sinai when there was no Torah, and God kept the world going just out of his kindness. That's 10 generations from Adam until Noach, 10 generations from Noach until Avram, and then 6 generations from Avram until Moshe. V'zanotam b'chazdo. God kept the world going with his kindness. That's why ki l'olam chazdo, once for each of those generations, 26 generations. And that's Hallel HaGadol, right? That God provides for everybody everything that it needs, gives everyone their food, gives them everything. Yeah, okay. So this is this Yerushalmi this Yerushalmi is saying similar to what's the Mishnah, which the Rambam based his thing about the sacrificing the Korban Pesach. What I really wanted was the next bit of the Yerushalmi. So Taman Tanina, it's taught in a Mishnah elsewhere. Yatzu v'achlu v'shatu. They went out, they ate and they drank. Or Ba'abana, right? After they did the Korban Pesach, and then they came. No, sorry. It's talking about a famine when there's a drought, and then it started raining. Then they went and they ate and they drank and they came back at night and they said Hallel HaGadol. Right? They said this Hallel HaGadol, praising God for ending the drought that happened. Ezoi Hallel HaGadol. What is Hallel HaGadol? It's in the feminine somehow. Hallel HaGadolah in the Yerushalmi. Rabbi Parnach b'shem Rabbi Chanina says Hodu Elokei Elokim. It is called Gadol because we refer to God as Elokei Elokim, the Almighty God, the great God. Amar Rabbi Yochanan b'vad mishe omdim b'beit Hashem, and we say it because it says those who stand in the house of God. Lama ba'elan tartin parashata. So why are these two chapters included? Rabbi Zera Mishum Rabau B'Shem Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachman Mnei Sheyiridat Geshamim Klola Behen, because it includes the rainfall. Al Daita Rabbi Yochanan Nicha. So I understand according to Rabbi Yochanan, Techli Malin Siim Mikzeh Haaretz. The clouds rose up from the ends of the earth and they provided rain, and that's the end of the drought. So we say Hallel Hagadol. Rabbi Chanina Mai. So why does Rabbi Chanina? How does Elokei Elokim connected to the ending of the drought? To begin tichtiv, because it says Nosen lech lechol basar kil b'chasdo. Thank you, Michael. The Yerushalmi knew the same verse that you just provided for me. That God provides food for every living thing. Tani bar kapara zohi halal gadol. This is what we call halal hagadol. Chad bar abaya ava kumi tefota. One wealthy man, important person, stood in front of the ark on the when the famine finished, when the drought finished. Amar said to them, Anun batrai mada anum amar. Repeat after me what I say. Hada amra. So he said, Hada amra late hada didan. I don't understand that. Hada amra late hada didan. I don't understand. I'm sorry. Amramada hada didan. I pass. I think if he's citing it and they're answering afterwards, saying Kiyom Chasto, then I think they're not accepting that it was their miracle as well. Ramana says, no, if they say that it's still them taking part in the miracle. Nisa Havarav, it was a great miracle, begin Ken Amarlon, and that's why he said to them, Anun Batrai Mada Anama. He wasn't saying, you say it's my miracle and not yours. He was saying it's such a big miracle that I want to sing it, we should sing it responsively. Which is how Moshe, after the splitting of the sea, when they sang as Yashir, that was also said responsively between Moshe and the Jewish people. So they're trying to repeat that here in terms of when the drought ends and saying Hallel Hagadol. Question is, why are we saying that? Why are we saying this Hallel Hagadol on Seder night? A similar idea over here in the Bavli. Once they decreed a fast in Lod, there was no rain. And it started raining before midday, before they got to got even halfway through the fast. Go home, eat, drink, and make a festival. They went home, they drank, did what they needed, they made a Asu Yom Tov. They came back and they said Hallel Hagadol. So what do we know? Hallel Hagadol is thanking God for keeping us, for sustaining us, for providing for us, especially in times of great need. And we know we say that on Seder night after the regular Hallel. So what we're saying then is not only thanking God kind of for leaving Egypt, I guess, which is the beginning of Hallel, but also thank you, God, for providing for us, for getting us to this day, for looking after us, and giving us all of our needs, which doesn't really seem to fit in with the Haggadah and the Seder. It doesn't really seem to have anything to do with leaving Egypt specifically. It seems like a great miracle. We were about to die from drought, and then the rain fell, and we're saved. Let's say, but it's unclear, or at least I'm pretending right now that I don't have an answer. It's unclear why we should say that after we've had our dinner on Seder night. What's that got to do with Pesach? And fundamentally, there's no other time that we're halfway through our prayers and we just stop and do, well, I guess on Simchat Torah, but not really. We don't say half of shacharit and then say, okay, whoops, let me have my breakfast now, and then come back and finish later. It seems very strange that we start off saying Hallel, we get excited by it, then we stop, have our dinner, and then we pick up and we finish Hallel, and then we say Hallel Hagadol, which really seems to have nothing at all to do with with the beginning of Hallel or with leaving Egypt and Pesach at all. So there's a Tosefta in Pesachim. I'm not really going to talk about why we say Hallel in Shul on Seder night. That's also something we never do any other time. Say Hallel at night in Shul. But it's a very widespread custom to do that, and it's a custom that goes back at least to the Tosefta, which means from the time of the Mishnah, the 2nd century or earlier CE. B'nei ha'ir she'ein lehem mi she'yikreh et Hallel. If people, because Pesach you do it with your family, if you don't know how to say Hallel, you're doing Pesach, don't say Hallel. So then holech lebeit knesset v'koreh Perak Rishon. They go to Shul, and together they can read. The rabbi reads. Somebody can read for them the beginning of Hallel. Holchin v'ochlin v'shotin, and then they go home and they eat and they drink, meaning they eat and drink their Seder. Right, go and do the rest of their Seder. V'chozrin v'gormin et kolon. Then they come back to Shul after they've had their meal and they finish saying Hallel. V'im yivshar lehem ken, and if they can't come back after the Seder because they'll be too drunk or that's too far away or they can't organize the timing, if they can't come back afterwards, then Gomrim et Kolo Hallel, then they finish the whole Hallel kind of before they start saying the Seder as part of Ma'ariv before they go home and start and say and do their Seder. Ein pochtim mimeno ve'en mosifin lav, you can't say more or less. Rabbi Eliezer Part aya poshet bo dvarim, Rabbi Yaakov bo dvarim. So actually, Rabbi Eliezer did. So he said it plain, and Rebbe would double up the Hallel and repeat the verses that we repeat. Right. So what do we see here? According to Tosefta, this is, I think, the basis for saying Hallel in Shul, because maybe people won't be able to say it when they get home, and it's too difficult to go home and come back, so they say the whole thing beforehand. And that shows how critical Hallel is to Seder night, right? Because we think the important bit is, well, obviously, Matzah, Pesach, Maro, those are the important things. If you don't say those, if you don't eat those, you haven't done Seder. And the 4 cups of wine, and the 4 questions, and talking about Egypt, and experience Egypt, and staying up all night with the rabbis until it's time to say Shema. But this Tosefta makes it sound like saying Hallel is also a crucial part of Seder night, and really it should be divided between the before the meal and after the meal. But if that's not possible, you do the whole thing beforehand in Shul, which is why we do it. Says the Maharal in the end of Geruot Hashem, Hallel zenechlak l'shnayim. Hallel on Seder night we divide it into 2. Kodem Asuda, V'achar Asuda. There's a bit before the meal and a bit after the meal. V'atam, and the reason is Kidei sheyen ne'emar Hallel al Pesach v'amatzah. We want to say Hallel while we're eating our Pesach and our matzah. Just like in the time of the temple, we would sing Hallel while we're eating our Korban Pesach, right? So too, we want to do that in our Seder. We haven't got a Pesach. Yeh Hallel kolel halav lefanav v'acharav. So we want to have our Hallel before and after the meal, even though we're not eating a Korban Pesach, but we do it kind of zecher the Pesach, and in that way we can say we're saying Hallel while we're eating our Korban Pesach. If we would say all of Hallel before the meal, all of Hallel after the meal, we'd think that we say Hallel and then we finish and have our meal, or we have our meal and we finish and we do Hallel. Nowadays we eat matzah instead of Pesach, of the sacrifice, and that's why we divide our Hallel before and after. Because the Hallel brackets the eating, then the eating is not considered a break in the middle of Hallel. We're not dividing the Hallel into 2. In fact, what we're doing is saying Hallel and eating our Korban Pesach at the same time. So that's a really neat and kind of pshat explanation of why we take a break in the middle of Hallel to have our meal. We're not. We're doing exactly the mitzvah that we would do in the time of the temple of saying Hallel while we're eating our Korban Pesach, and in this case eating our matzah, Hallel while we're eating. So I guess so that we don't choke, or so that we can concentrate on our food. We begin before and we finish afterwards, and that's all one unit. So really, Hallel is part of, right? Why is it so important? Because it's part of eating our Korban Pesach, which is really the essence of Seder night. Now that's the pshat. The Abarbanel, who, I mean, I can't say this without saying the context, which I'm sure you know, that he was an advisor to King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. And then when the expulsion from Spain happened in 1492, they offered him that he could stay as the token Jew because he was so important in the palace. And he said, no, if the rest of the Jews are leaving Spain, I'm also leaving. And he spent many years wandering, lost all his fortune. When he left Spain, he couldn't take it with him. And he writes in many places about the trials and tribulations of being expelled from his country where he was somebody and going to be, trying to eke out a living all around Europe and North Africa. So he says, he wrote a commentary on the Haggadah, and he says, it's called Zevach Pesach. He says, Lama lo tiyeh kriyato medubeket im kodem esuda im acharet mibli tilo hefsek. Why don't we say all of Hallel at once, either all before the meal or all after the meal? And he has here 4 pages of explanation. I've just taken 2 paragraphs to share with you. If you have time, definitely go and look at what he has to say. And if you don't understand the Hebrew, you can do what I did and put it into Copilot and use AI to translate it. Did not a bad job. Anyway, so Abarbanel says that the rabbis found 2 halves, 2 different parts of Hallel. The first part from the beginning was the first 2 paragraphs. They refer to leaving Egypt and splitting the Red Sea. That's why this is called the Egyptian Hallel. Because they have a tradition that the first 2 chapters of Hallel, in the Tehillim say, are about leaving Egypt. And the Midrash says, Hallelu avdei Hashem, zeu shema misharer izkara neginati balayla. So I'll remember my silent line. If we just go back, to where we have the Hallel itself, you'll see that the first 2, chapters that we say, Hallel Hashem, Shirimotav Ve'olam, Misach Shesh V'Mo'or, Rama Kol Goyim Al Shemayim K'Vodo. Right, God has taken us. This is all about Me'ashpot Yerim Evyon. So Mekimi Me'afaldal, he raises up the poor from the dust. Me'ashpot Yerim Evyon, from the dung heaps, he lifts up the impoverished. Lo Shivim Devim, to seed them with nobles. Moshe Keres Abayim Vanismecha Aliyah. But Seisham Mitzrayim Beja Kamam Loez. And when Israel left Egypt, right, the house of Yaakov were from people of foreign speech. This is talk about leaving Egypt. This is talk about going to the sea, splitting the sea, right? Why sea? Why are you splitting? And then it says, and he brings out water from the rock. This is all about the historical leaving Egypt. That's the first 2 chapters of Hallel, and he goes through again, bringing proof after proof that those 2 sections refer specifically to leaving Egypt. This is right, quoting the Midrash, the Knesset Israel, the spirit of Israel, that part of some kind of divine spirit of God, says to God, every year we should remember the miracles you did, God, you did for me, the Jewish people, when we left Egypt. I'll sing to you about these miracles. And it goes through showing that this is right. And the Midrash ends up by saying Hallelujah Loavdei Hashem. ובזה נשלם החלק הראשון מההלל שידבר בקריאת ים סוף יציאת מצרים. And says Abarbanel, the first two paragraphs are the part of Hallel that talks about leaving Egypt. ולכן נעשה פה הפסקה. So now we're going to take a break. כמו שכתבתי, as I've explained. ובא אליו ברכת הגאולה. We're going to recite a blessing of redeeming us from Egypt. כפי שנתקנה על גאולת מצרים. That bracha that we read, right? שהגאלנו וגאלת אבותינו ממצרים. That's a bracha of redemption from Egypt, and that's what the first part of Hallel is talking about. Then we stop and have our dinner, and then we come back, and we pick up after bench, and we say, Shfach chamatcha lagoyim asher le'yaducha, v'al ha'mamlechot asher b'shmecha lo karau. Hamizmor hazeh im shar mizmorim asher ba'u acharav. So says the Barbanel, these verses and the rest of Hallel that comes afterwards, right? This is the second half of Hallel. This part of Hallel is talking about the future redemption. This is not talking about leaving Egypt. We're not praising God for what he did, but rather for what he's going to do in the future. We're praising God that he's going to redeem us from our current exile. Again, Abarbanel writing this is particularly poignant after what he went through. And that's the intent you're supposed to have on Seder night when you're saying this second half of Hallel. Because the future redemption is connected to the past redemption, to the redemption from Egypt. Right? And as the Gemara Brachot says that when Mashiach comes, we'll still remember Yetziat Mitzrayim, that one comes from the other. That's why this part of Hallel is talking about in the future tense. Just as the verbs in the first section are talking about the past tense. So Abarbanel says the reason we split Hallel into two, right? Again, Maharal said because we want Hallel to surround our meal like a Korban Pesach. Lovely. Abarbanel says beginning of Hallel and the beginning of Seder up until the meal is talking about leaving Egypt. After we've had our meal and we open the door and we say Shvach Hamatcha and then we start with Hallel, that's talking about the future redemption. Everything from there on is the future, and that's why we say Hallel Hagadol then as well. We're thanking God in the future for the miracle of keeping us alive, keeping us, providing for us to get to the future redemption, the same way that the 26 generations, when there was no Torah, God kept on going in his chesed and then gave the Torah. So too we're talking about either the chesed of just keeping the world going until the time of Mashiach, or providing everything we need until the time of Mashiach. And the Hallel Hagadol is the miraculous miracles that we're hoping for in the future, that are in the same way, that we're on the verge of death with the drought and the rain falls. Similarly, our whole life in exile, we're on the verge of death, and Mashiach will come and the redemption will come, and then we can say Hallel Hagadol. And that's the intent of that, which I think is just an amazing and wonderful idea. So just kind of wrapping up with a technicality of what blessing do we recite when we say Hallel. In fact, this is a machloket between Ashkenazim and Sephardim, just similar to the machloket we have about putting on tefillin. Ashkenazim, putting on tefillin is really one mitzvah, right? You put on tefillin on your arm and on your head, that's one mitzvah. And so Sephardim just say one bracha for putting on tefillin, for both the arm and the head. Ashkenazim recite two brachot, and then after we say the bracha for al mitzvah tefillin, putting on that tefillin on our head, we say Baruch Shem Kol Malchut Olam Va'ed, which is the verse you say if you said a bracha that you didn't need to say. So every single day, men put on their tefillin, and they say a bracha they don't need to say, and they say, whoops, sorry, I said a bracha, let me say the thing to fix that up. So same thing over here. If we start saying Hallel, we say a bracha at the beginning of Hallel, then there's no need to say another bracha for the second half of Hallel, or the end of Hallel. And Sephardim then don't recite a special bracha for that, and Ashkenazim do. And this is, here's Masechet Sofrim is similar to what we saw in Arachin about the 18 days of saying Hallel, but it also talks about the bracha. It talks about the 8 days of Chanukah and the 18 days that you say Hallel, and you have to make a bracha before you say Hallel. Olekroton be'ne'ima, and you sing it nicely, melodiously. Titani Rav Shuma, you say Yamim Shmona Asrei V'Layla Achad Yachid Gomer Ben Hallel. So Masechet Sofrim is one of the Masechet Ktanot, which I believe is later than the time of the Mishnah, but it's from the time of the Gemara, I think, but I'm not exactly sure. And here it says there's 18 days and one night that we say Hallel, right? So this one does include Seder night for saying Hallel. What are the 18 days? Shema Yimei Chanukah, Yom Tov Shel Tzed, Yom Tov Rishon Shel Pesach, V'Leilo. Wait, I've skipped Sukkot. Whatever. That's the 18 days we know. And Begola, Hashem V'Chad Yom Mishtei Leilot. And outside Israel there are 21 days and 2 nights. The 2 nights of Pesach, Seder night. Mitzvah min muvcha lekrot halal b'shnei leilot shel galiot u'levarech aleinu amram b'neima. It's a mitzvah. The ideal mitzvah is to say Hallel 2 nights of Pesach outside Israel, and to make a bracha beforehand, and to say them, beautifully. K'mosh ne'emar v'neromar shemo yachtav u'kshu koreh oto b'beito ein tzrich levarech shekvar berich barabim. When you repeat it at home, so it sounds like Masechet Sofrim has us saying Hallel in shul and then going home and saying it again. When you repeat it at home, you don't make another bracha because you already said it and said the bracha when you said Hallel in shul. And the Ran quotes Rav Hai Gaon. Ran Psachim says on Daf Kafav Pe'arif, Aval Rabbeinu Hai Gaon katav b'tshuva she'ein mevrachin al Hallel shebelei Psachim likmor et Hallel. You don't recite a bracha on Pesach of Likmor et Hallel. She'ein anu korin oto b'Torah, korin ela b'Torah omer shira. We don't say the bracha of Likro because we don't read it, rather we sing it. It's a song, so we don't make that bracha. We don't say the bracha of Likmor et Hallel because we're singing it. Just to keep this short without going into too much detail about the different brachot, because of course we Ashkenazim do say brachot for Hallel, 2 brachot, but the Torah brings down different opinions. B'inyan brachat Hallel. So, in terms of Hallel, specifically on Seder night, there's a machloket. Ritzbah, who is Rav Yitzchak ben Avram, I believe, Haya mevarech alav bet pamim. He would make 2 brachot on Hallel at Seder. Achad kodem achila, achat achar achila. Right, one for the bit of Hallel we say before we eat, and one for the part of Hallel we say after we eat, and that's what we do. V'kenai noheg Rav rot nevork. V'ken kata Rav Hai for Rav Tzemach, Rav Amram. So the Gaonim are saying, and the early Tosfot are saying Hallel, saying 2 brachot for Hallel. Aval Aritz Gaius, but Maharitz Gaius, and I don't know who he is, don't remember. Va'avi ha'ezri kadvu she'ein nevarech alav klal. Don't make any bracha on Hallel lefi shecholkim oto l'shnayim lefnei asuv lacher, because we don't say all of Hallel at one go. So you can't make a bracha of finishing Hallel because we do half and half. V'im ken hechim v'chu. How can you make a bracha on something if you're going to stop in the middle, take a break? And the Torah says, my father the Rosh also would not make a bracha. And I, the Torah, think also you shouldn't make a bracha because we're breaking it into 2, but also because now we have a safek. Is the halacha like the Ritzbah and the Gaonim, or is the halacha like Maritz Gaius and the Rosh? It's a machloket. Every time you've got a safek about whether to say a bracha or not, she'ein avrech brachot ein ma'akvot, because you can do the mitzvah. The mitzvah doesn't prevent you doing. Sorry, the bracha does not prevent you from doing the mitzvah, and therefore you're safer if you don't make a bracha. It turns out there's 4 opinions about brachot. Do you not make a bracha? Do you make 2 brachot? And if you do, are they likro et Hallel or likmor et Hallel? And that works out as 4 different permutations, but I'm not going to go into that now because I want to spend just the last few minutes going back to something I said 2 weeks ago about the 4th and the 5th cups of wine and connection of the cup of Eliyahu, and I guess particularly since the events of Motzei Shabbat which I think, if you haven't seen the news, on Motzei Shabbat, Iran launched an attack on Israel, and we saw the news at, I guess, 9-10 o'clock, and it said Iran has launched an attack and the drones are heading towards you, and go to sleep now because there's nothing you can do. They won't be there for a few hours. And sitting and just waiting and being powerless, and not quite knowing how to respond to that, I think was probably the best I've ever understood the idea of the Jews in Egypt waiting for midnight and the death of the firstborn and for Pharaoh to set them free. They knew it was coming. They knew they'd done their protection. They put their blood on the doorpost. They'd done what they had to do. And they just had to sit and wait. And that's what it felt like this past Motzei Shabbat. It felt very much like a Leil Shimurim, a night of protection, which is what Seder night is, that we just sat and waited, and the army and God did miracles and saved all of us from what could have been imminent destruction. So I guess with that in mind, I'm going to get a bit poetic or bring some sources that talk about Hallel in that context. So after we've had our dinner, before we start with the second half of Hallel, Mozgim Kosher Eliyahu Poskim Edat, we pour the cup of Elijah and we open the door. That's what it says in the Haggadah. There's different opinions. Do you open the door? Don't you open the door? When do you fill the cup of Elijah? Anyway, and what you say is, we say to God, pour out your anger on the nations that don't know you, on the kingdoms that haven't called by your name, who haven't recognized you. They have tried to destroy Yaakov. They've tried to destroy the beauty of the land. Pour your wrath over them, and your anger should reach them. Let your anger pursue them and destroy them from under the earth. So I don't wish that for the Iranian people, but there are quite a few ayatollahs in Iran who I'd be happy for that to happen to, so that we could then go back to having peace with Iran like we did up until 1978, 79, till the revolution, when Iran was our closest ally in the region. So we open the door, we say this to God, and then we sit back and we continue Hallel, and we praise for the future redemption, according to the Barbanel. Now there's another version. This is what I talked about 2 weeks ago. There's a version of a text of the Mishnah where Rabbi Tarfon says we have the fourth cup for Hallel. In fact, this version we split. We say the second half of regular Hallel on the fourth cup, right? Tanaban Ravi Gomer Alavet Hallel, Vamer Hallel Agadol Div Rabbi Tarfon. So our version is you do the fourth cup, you finish Hallel, and then you do Hallel Agadol. But the Rif has a version of this, which Chamishi Amar Alav Hallel Agadol to Rabbi Tarfon. You do your fourth cup after regular Hallel, and then you take your fifth cup, and that's what you say Hallel Agadol on, and that's kind of your future redemption. It's Hallel Agadol. The Rif is not the only person who has that version of the text. The Rosh also has most of the Gaonim, and in fact, the majority of Rishonim have a fifth cup in their Seder, which according to most of them, you say Hallel Hagadol, which, as I said, doesn't really fit, doesn't really have anything to do with Egypt per se. That's a separate cup, and they have that. We only have 4 cups. We follow the Rashbam and Tosfot, who in the Gemara Pesachim point out, they say the Gerus has to be 4 cups, not 5. And the Beit Yosef summarizes this in his commentary. Beit Yosef is Rabbi Yosef Karo, wrote the Shulchan Aruch, commenting on the Torah. He says, Kos Chamishi, Lo's Kali Gerus Rashbam. According to Rashbam, there is no 5th cup. Vein Lasalta, and therefore you shouldn't do it. Hu asher katavli b'siman shekodem zeh sherashbam gores b'vayter revi gomer alav Hallel v'omer Hallel Gadol. Right, that's what I told you. The Rashbam says the 4th cup. The text, our Gemara has been corrected according to Rashi or Rashbam's version. So Rabbi Tarfon says to you the 4th cup is for Hallel HaGadol. The wording is strange. It doesn't really make sense to word it like that, and that's why having a 5th cup makes more sense in the text. But anyway. According to this, there's no mention of the 5th cup, not the Mishnah of Rabbi Breita, no mention of it anyway. But both Rif and Rambam have in their text that you say take a fifth cup for Hallel Hagadol. Divrei B'Tafon, V'Ketafa Ran Sha'Razah Saved Rabbi Tafon Paliga Matnitin. So the Ran says that Rizrachia Halevi Baal HaMaor says that Rabbi Tafon is disagreeing with the Mishnah, that the rabbis of the Mishnah say 4 cups, Rabbi Tafon says 5 cups. Right, because the first Mishnah in the last chapter says only 4 cups. For Rabbi Tafon Sava Chamishanin, who he says Rabbi Tafon says 5 cups. In that case, the halacha is not like Rabbi Tafon. But there are a lot of opinions that say we do that. And Lo Nira, Beit Yosef says, I don't agree with the reading of the Zerachia Halevi, that there's a dispute. The Sugyan, Lo Nira, the Sugyan Bekula Pirkan Rehita D'Arbakos Chava V'Chamisha Rishut. The simple reading of the whole Mishnah, the whole chapter, is that there's 4 cups that you've got to have for Pesach, and the 5th cup is optional. Right? If you want, drink it and say the 5th, say Hallel Hagadol. Or there's a lechatchila mitzvah to drink a 5th cup. Right? And to say Hallel Hagadol, Mehadol Hashem, Ki Tov Ad Al Not Bavel. But that's not as obligatory as the first 4. That's why the Mishnah says, Lo yifchetu me'arba kosot, don't have less than 4 cups, but really should have 5. V'arosh katav rashbam gares kos arba, omer alav halagadol, kos chamishim kashmei. I was giving this because I've run out of time. Anyway, so the Beit Yosef goes back and forth whether it should be 4 or 5, and really comes down that there's 4 cups of wine you have to drink, and a 5th cup that's optional. Shulchan Aruch, I've run out of time, so he does not mention the 5th cup, the same author of the Beit Yosef. What I wanted to talk about was the Mishnah Berurah. What happened to the Mishnah Berurah? Don't tell me I deleted the Mishnah Berurah. Oh, yes, okay, fine, I just put it in the wrong place. Mishnah Berurah says, the Ramah says, Shulchan Aruch says about 4 cups. The Ramah says, some say, that's what we do, that you say this verse to pour out your wrath before you finish up Hallel. Open the door, to remember that it's a night of protection. And in the merit of us trusting in God, believing in God, Mashiach will come, and he will pour out his wrath on the idolaters. That's from Mari Yaakov Be'erav, who we talked about in the previous series, and there's messianic views. They can argue, and this is what we do. Fine, I'll do that. And so Mishnah Berurah says, the reason that we open the door and we say Shofar Chamatcha is to remember that this is a night that God protects us. We're not afraid of anything. Our custom is to pour an extra cup, and we call that Koshel Eliyahu Hanavi. This alludes to the fact that just as God redeemed us from Egypt, he will redeem us in the future and bring us Mashiach. And that is the Haftarah. We're going to read this Shabbat HaGadol, where we end up Zichru. I left off the sign Zichru Shal Moshe Avdi Asher Tziviti, and it says Hine Anochi Sholech Liam et Eliyahu Hanavi Lefnei Bo Yom Hashem HaGadol V'Narav Heishiv Le'avavot Banim V'Lev Banim Alavot. God will send Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and terrible day of the Lord when Mashiach comes. He will turn the heart of the fathers to children, heart of children to fathers. That is the message of Seder night. So together, I just want to finish with Menachem Kasher, who I mentioned last time, but he was a rabbi in the 20th century, and he held that we should drink a 5th cup of wine to give thanks to God for bringing us back to Israel and for all the miracles that he's done for us for creating Medinat Israel. Now, I'm not saying in terms of halacha we should do this, because my shoes aren't big enough for that, but particularly in the current situation, I think at the very least, when we pour the cup of Elijah, we should have in mind our trust in God, our belief that it's a Leil Shemir, that God's protecting us, and when we say Hallel Gadol, we should be thanking him for the future redemption, which is going to end all of the suffering that's going on right now around us. Thank you very much. Chag Kasher v'Sameach. I'll be picking up with a new series about construct the Shemona Esrei starting on May 21st. Look forward to seeing you all then. Please sign up. And Chag Kasher v'Sameach. That's it. Thank you very much.
Wonderful share. Chag Sameach.